Hello, welcome to How to Build an Effective Security Operations Center webinar. My name is Nick Pidek. I am the CMO here at BitLyft Cybersecurity. And thanks for joining us today. We've got a great presentation. If you are just starting out building a security operations center or you've got one established, I know our speaker today has got some great tips and tricks lined up to help you make it as effective as possible. And I know it's going to spark some really good conversation. I'm going to dive right in, but first, a few housekeeping rules. If you've got some questions, feel free to put them into the question box there on your screen. We're going to have a time of Q&A at the end, so feel free to write anything in there that you may have questions for on or around the SOC. And of course, we'll have some contact details at the end if you want to follow up, and we'll have this presentation available for you to download as well. So real quick about us, and again, this is not a sales pitch, it's just who we are. We're BitLyft Cybersecurity. We exist to illuminate and eliminate cyber threats for a safer world. If you think about managed cybersecurity as a service, we've got a platform offering here at BitLyft that allows us to leverage the best of people and tools and software to provide 24/7 monitoring and remediation to threats. You've got a dedicated team when you need it. And we work with all sizes from small to medium to enterprise. Quick little intro about Jason. He's the founder and CEO of BitLyft. I work with him on a day-to-day basis here at BitLyft, but he's got over 20 years in IT experience. And one of the cool things about Jason is he's got a unique perspective on bridging the gap between the IT world and security world. And those two things don't always align, as I'm sure he's going to talk about today. But he's got a unique perspective having that experience in the IT world and in security. And he draws some really good connections and really helps create a good posture, not only for our SOC team, but all the companies and organizations we work with. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jason. Thanks for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Nick. Great to have all of you join us today for this webinar. I promise to do my best in bringing value to the conversation that we're going to have today. I'm going to be sharing with you a lot about how I've built BitLyft so far. And a lot of that is around the people and a lot about what we've built inside of our SOC. And maybe even as the conversation goes forward, I'll maybe dabble into a little bit of our how we've built our platform so that you can think about what you might even want to do. One of the major focuses of today is to bring information to the community out there. So we wanted to share what we've been doing and what we're doing today so that you can build up your cybersecurity defenses and offenses just better than what you're doing today. So a couple of items that we're going to cover is what to look at when you're hiring. That is one of the biggest questions that we have gotten from our clients, is that even though they're a client with us, they still always tend to maybe hire one, maybe even two people, just depends on the size of the organization. And the next biggest point would be the challenges around understanding those vulnerabilities in the technology, both software and hardware. And there's common misconceptions here. A lot of organizations are trying to fight this right now, and so we're going to touch on that. Reviewing and understanding log data, even though monitoring log data has been around for a while, a lot of people are starting to ask questions about why should I monitor log data? We used to turn logging data, logs off. Now you want us to turn them on. So validating your unique network activity. This is a big one these days, especially with all of us during this pandemic COVID time. Just what is the network activity supposed to look like? And we're going to touch upon that. Kind of get into what is abnormal and normal in network activity and software activity and even SaaS activity. That is a big one these days. A lot of people are going out and consuming SaaS comparably to 5 or 10 years ago. And then the role of automation and its effectiveness. And we're going to discuss these more in depth. So, and again, as Nick mentioned, if you have any questions or you might want to have me drill into something a little bit more, please feel free to use the chat. or the question and answer box to do that, we're happy. We've left plenty of time here at the end for Q&A. So what you're looking for when you're hiring. The first question I always ask clients is what is your mindset? Are you looking to build an 8x5 SOC team, or are you the size and scale where you really want to go after it 24/7? It then starts to get into a budget conversation a little bit, because you could go after greenfield, newer people, and maybe get them at a little bit less of a budget. If you are going to go after all highly skilled people that have been in it for 5 or 10 years, then you're going to need the budget to support that. You're also going to need to know how many people you're going to need to adequately support a 24/7 SOC team. You kind of need somewhere around the minimum of 5 to 7 people, just depending on the role and their day-to-day tasks, and then the size of the organization. If they're going to focus on just your organization and you want to hit 24/7. If you want to do 8x5, you could get away with as little as 1 to 2 people. And again, there's a lot of talking points in here today, so I'm going to make sure that we cover those, but there's a lot of variations here. So what I want to make sure is that you have a mindset and a framework that there's not a one size fits all in cybersecurity. This really is up to the business. It's up to your organization. It also is up to what type of compliancy that you're going to need to meet. So that's kind of all wrapped up into just bullet point 1. The second here is great security is built on analytical minds. So we run people through some general tests, but we also ask them, what do they like to do when they're both in work and out of work? And what do they see their future for the next 3 to 5 years? And how do they like data? These questions that you ask those people is what you're trying to find out is, are they analytical? They need to ask why a lot in cybersecurity. Why is it set up this way? Why is this service account doing this particular behavior? Why is this log data telling me what it's telling me? And they need to have that type of mindset in order to keep digging. And that's the biggest part of security is when IT ops, you're making it operational. And once it's operational and it's set up, oftentimes IT ops folks have to keep moving on and have to keep building. And so they're the builders of the network and the software and the systems, but they might not be the finishers, right? That come back behind it and tidy it up and finish it up and put the bow and ribbon on it. And oftentimes that's where the security people are coming back around after something is stood up and they're trying to secure it now. That also gets into a little bit of what Nick mentioned around one of my passions is the DevSecOps or DevOpsSec, however you want to say it, kind of movement is just pulling these people together and making them an integrated team versus a separated team. You want to make sure that your IT ops and security folks are talking with one another, are communicating. Maybe they're even sprinting inside the same sprints with one another, because of the mere fact that the security team needs to know what's up and coming. They might not deal with it this week or next week, but they need to know what's coming so that they can keep up with the IT folks. Knowledge around network complexities is a big deal. Over the last few years and even maybe 10 years, but the last 5 years, you had a lot of shadow IT taking place. And you had a lot of network complexities and SaaS and ERPs and CRMs and all of that taking place. And so the security team really wasn't able to keep up with this. And so now it's a matter of knowing and mapping out the network complexities that are there, and the SOC team completely having knowledge around what is the network made up of, where's data flowing, what are the SaaSes that we're using and how are we using them, simply because major gaps in the network can happen quickly without the security team taking a look at it, understanding what's happening there, and identifying the gaps and vulnerabilities. Coding and scripting capabilities is a very good skill set to have with an individual when you're hiring, simply because they could move from the monitoring and detection state, and with the raw number of things that are going to be coming at them, they will need to know how to code and script in order to keep up with the level of things that are going to be coming at them. And then communication skills. I've been in IT for over 20 years now, and I know that communication skills is always a big deal. There's a lot of introverts inside of the IT space. It's just part of human beings. And so what we have to do is make sure that we can work with the individuals that are on our team. They're smart, they're well educated, they're great people. We've just got to work with both sides of that type of skill set and that type of behavior to produce good communication skills. So as we move on and we cover the next topic here, challenging the next major challenge is really vulnerabilities. Software and hardware present this idea, right, that you are always going to have vulnerabilities that are happening. And I had somebody tell me, well, we're doing really, really well with our vulnerabilities. We've run both the Tenable Nessus scanner, and we use Qualys, and we use something else. And we're getting all of our vulnerabilities down into green zones and this type of thing. And I said, great. You now have all of the known, air quotes, vulnerabilities taken care of that you know of, and that Tenable knows of, and that Qualys knows of, and that these vulnerability scanners know of, and there's a CVE attached to it. But what you don't know and what you need to be cautious of is the unknown and undiscovered vulnerabilities, the 0 days, or the things that haven't even been researched. And that is where that starts to roll into this life cycle where you know where your assets are in the environment, your highly critical data, your highly critical databases, and you need to start to understand how we're going to address those vulnerabilities, even though a big company like Tenable or Qualys or someone else hasn't identified it with a CVE number and said, hey, this is a vulnerability. And the manufacturer might not even know it's a vulnerability yet. But what I always tell our clients is treat everything as if it does have a vulnerability. And you can obviously risk score it so that you're not treating everything as a number one priority. But for instance, if you know that you have these critical core servers over here that have critical core data that you're trying to protect, well, obviously you could say, let's just auto assume there's vulnerabilities in there, and we are going to protect that like it's Fort Knox. And then everything else has subcategories below it. The next biggest thing is really the sprawl of hardware, software, multi-cloud, and SaaS. The day that we're living in, more and more of our clients are telling us and are really having a roadmap to like a full cloud or some sort of cloud mixture with maybe a little bit of on-prem, maybe something still over at their co-location data center. But they want this capability, especially in the time that we're living in, where everybody and anybody can work from anywhere. And so in order to be able to prep for that going forward in the future, you need to be able to protect the company that has to stay alive and keep them protected and knowledgeable around the vulnerabilities that are out there. Even if you feel like they're a little bit out of your control, you need to at least be aware of how would I mitigate the risk if that cloud provider or that SaaS provider failed me. How would I be able to mitigate our risk as a company? And you need to have that conversation inside, because you could go out and just Google the number of news articles around clouds and SaaS and MSPs that have had issues, and it ultimately puts their customers at risk. One of the biggest things that we've noticed in the last 6 months is RDP sessions. And this is the example here, being taken advantage of without authentication. So Microsoft put this out. We actually seen this taking place, but this was the 0 day that came out that really didn't require it. Was a flaw. And inside of the RDP session, you could actually get around authenticating inside of the environment, and you could get all the way to an Active Directory controller. And then from there, you could pivot around the network and have essential hierarchy that you needed to do whatever you needed to do. We blogged on it. There was multiple news articles about it, obviously because of the risk that it posed to so many organizations out there. But that's a big one. So moving on, reviewing and understanding log data. So if you rewind 10 years ago, even 15 years ago, a lot of organizations did not have a noticeable conscious of the importance of log data. Today, multiple compliances and multiple standards, MITRE TAC framework, NIST, PCI, GLBA, and even CMMC, those compliances now say your log data and having a SIM inside of your environment is foundational. It's actually written into the compliance. They're recommending it, suggesting it. You need to have log data in order to be able to prove or disprove that you've had an attack or criminals been in your environment, or was data exfiltrated outside of your organization. You need to have log data today. So going back to the analytical minds that I had on the third slide, when you're placing and hiring the folks inside of your SOC team, they are going to be looking at a mass amount of data. And that's important. You've got to make sure that they're not going to easily get burnt out, that they enjoy looking at raw log data or being able to correlate data points together. And the other part that I would say here is that when they're looking at this amount of log data inside the SOC, another part that you're going to want to just make sure that you're aware of with that person is rotating them into maybe other roles, maybe every other month or every 3 months, simply because if they're so focused, they get the blinders on and they only see that raw log data and they don't quite understand the whole picture of everything that's happening. So moving them around at some sort of level, maybe spending 20 hours a week inside of logs and another 20 hours a week doing other things with the other team members, but just so that they don't get the blinders on and they're so laser focused. But this is, as you look at this and you're training up your SOC team and you're getting them their head wrapped around their day-to-day job, parsing data is going to be a requirement. So I want to make sure we work with multiple SIM providers. And if any of them claim out of the box full functionality, it's just simply not true. And I even get super frustrated with the sales folks that say, oh yeah, Office 365, Google Gmail, we've got it, no big deal. Buy this SIM, put it in, you're good to go. The problem is that that's not always the case. It may have been the case 3 months ago when Microsoft or whoever the provider is of that log source and that manufacturer of the SIM were 100% hand in hand, locked in step. But as you and I both know, Microsoft and these other providers come out with new APIs and new log formats. And so what that means is that SOC team member is going to have to know how to parse log data. They're going to need to know regex. And regex is just a simple log parsing term and type of way that you parse the logs, but they need to be familiar with it. The other point that they need to be familiar with is correlating the metadata. So IP addresses coming from destinations, going to destinations, and maybe even pivoting. They'll need to be able to work inside of that SIM or whichever tool that you're going to procure and put in the organization. They need to know how to stitch together information, because as much as a SIM helps you, and it really does help you, it helps our team immensely, because you're going to have lots of data coming at you. But still, a human being is fighting the other human being that's on the criminal side. And oftentimes the software is not caught up to speed with what's the next step that the criminal is probably going to take. That takes human intellect still. The other aspect here is data mining. What questions do you ask? I always like a good security analyst that always is asking why. And you can't get frustrated with those people because they are literally, they're an investigator. They're digging deep and deeper and deeper into the problems. And I've often seen, IT system admins or network administrators eventually get frustrated and throw their hands up in the air at the security folks. And that's really not what they're trying to do. They're really trying to get at one point you designed and developed the network or the system, and it was good at that time, but it might not be good now. And it's because times have changed, software's changed, the way that we work has changed, everything has changed. And so we need to have a different lens that we're looking at this through when we're walking down this security road together. And I mean those words. We need to walk down the security road together, both teams, all team members, to secure these aspects. And so data mining is critical. Now on to a little bit of tools. Tools are only so much, they only provide you so much help. I would never buy a tool to be an end all be all, and the tool does not always 100% replace a human being. A tool aids in the human being. We've run across a lot of organizations that we've met in our years, and they want to either maybe hire a person, or they want to hire tools and buy tools. And I'd say, well, they go hand in hand. If you hire people, it doesn't even matter what the job role is. If I hire a salesperson, I need a CRM tool. If I hire a security analyst, I need a SIM, I need a vulnerability management tool. I need multiple tools to help them do their job role. And so tools are a big aspect of what we're doing today. So as we move on to helping you understand validating unique networks, every client that we worked with today, we've told them there's no security template. There's no one size fits all that happens in security. And that is the truth, because every network that we've come in contact with has had a different behavior, a different uniqueness to it. And that's because everybody does business a little bit differently, or they've had somebody that says, I like the way that we're setting this up, and they've done it that way. And that's great. But the SOC team really needs to be integrated with your IT team. And I kind of mentioned this a little bit up front, but you want that SOC team running with the IT team. The IT team and both teams could be getting instruction from the CIO and the CISO or your IT director. But at the same token, that SOC team might be securing what's going on today, but they also need to have eyes and ears of what's coming. What is the IT team maybe building for the business to enable the business? They need to be looked at exactly the same way. So they need to be in sync. The SOC team is always trying to determine what's normal and abnormal. And this gets into this third bullet point and fourth bullet point is kind of based on some newer technology that we're using in the marketplace today. You might know of user behavior analytics or user entity behavior analytics. And this is important. This is where I would say a tool does help the human beings that are in the SOC quickly identify issues, quickly identify areas of concern. This is where the old term, trying to find a needle in the haystack, is important. If Susie, and I'm just naming this name, Susie comes in every day and she's part of maybe the marketing team and she does these tasks every day, But all of a sudden, Susie, the username, touches some files that are in the finance folder, and Susie has never done that before. There's a few things, right? That's the needle in a haystack that you're trying to find quickly, is that behavior anomaly. And you could quickly identify, is Susie trying to find out something that she shouldn't be touching, or is Susie's credentials compromised? The other aspect of compromised credentials is you could say, why is this account logging in both on the network here inside the office or from her remote home? And why is the account also being logged in from what we would call a land travel violation, meaning a further distance away than somebody could walk, drive, or fly, and it's happening at the exact same time? Well, user behavior analytics and being able to quickly stitch together that log data in seconds helps you identify those types of activities on the network inside the systems, and your SOC team needs that at their fingertips. Otherwise, what'll happen is dwell time will happen, and the criminal will have access to those accounts, that information, for most likely hours or days before a SOC team member can actually get to it. So moving on, and that kind of plays into this next slide. This is data that we've observed. So when you look at this, if one alarm alert issue happens and the time to fix or resolve, meaning the SOC analyst looks into it, identifies it, checks the data that's behind it, maybe even looks at the log sources, the data is still parsing correctly, and all of that, total time to investigate or remediate that alarm is about 5 minutes. You now amp that up and start to look at 400, and you move that number on, you're into 33 hours if you are having one person triage 400 alarms and alerts. And the same thing goes for 10,000. Let's say in the 10,000 bracket, your people inside of your SOC have increased efficiency some, but they're still manually doing a lot of things. It's about 4 minutes. And so that's 666 hours, right? This is the due diligence that you need to be talking amongst your team members in the time that it actually is to evaluate these things. And then the average enterprise SOC receives more than 10,000 alerts a day. And that is actually both a Gartner and a Forrester type of validation data right there. You can go out and Google that and find that in many locations. So the whole goal is that if you are developing or you have put together a SOC team, they have a lot of data coming at them. And so time, speed, and efficiency are all important in their role. Now, the role of automation and why we are a big believer, and I'm a big believer that you need automation inside of that security team, is simply because they're spending time on a lot of things. They've got project load. They need to be able to automate the systems and the responses. Think about if an email account is compromised and they need to automate the logging out of the account, the changing of the password, the notification to the user. They might even need to figure out how long was the account compromised, was any data exfiltrated. And that's just on one alarm and alert, while the system is constantly monitoring the rest of the environment and more alarms and alerts are coming in. So you want to make sure that they have the tools at their disposal to get this. Oftentimes you'd say time is money, right? Everybody agrees to that. But it's also opportunity for the attackers, the criminals. All of the things that you're doing, you want to also be asking yourself, does this help us reduce dwell time in the environment? If a criminal hacker gets access to a set of credentials or the system, or they get in through a VPN, they're on the network, how do we quickly identify it and how do we quickly remediate it to reduce that dwell time? And talk about it, whiteboard it, discuss it amongst your team. It's critical. Performing a cost-benefit analysis of the tools is important. There are variations of tools. And what I often tell people is that you can't just focus on the price right off the get-go. You've got to understand, what does the tool do for us? How does it benefit us? What are the features and functions of the tool? So that you can understand, you know what, this tool might cost more. It might cost double what we were thinking, what we were budgeting for. But you know what? It helps us reduce workload on the team. And so instead of hiring 5 people, we can have 4 people on the team, and the tool actually helps us make ourselves more efficient on the team. So you need to be able to do that benefit analysis. And also utilizing the user behavior analytics, UBA, to reduce those false positives and ultimately find the needle in the haystack quickly. So some key takeaways here are looking for that multifaceted SOC talent. I've been told, you're looking for the unicorn type people. And I don't always agree with that statement. I think that these people exist. It is sometimes a different job role and job description than what we're used to. A lot of folks have thought about getting into security and think that they're always just going to be like monitoring the firewall or monitoring endpoint antivirus and helping with encrypt local endpoints. That's not really the SOC today here in 2020. The SOC today is a multifaceted. You need to have skill sets on the team that is different than just firewall and endpoint and things of that nature. Keeping the IT and the SOC folks in sync is a critical component, critical process. Even inside of BitLyft, what we do is we actually sprint with our clients, and we use the Kanban Scrum methodology, and we sprint with our clients. The clients know what we're working on for them. We know what they're working on, and we're in lockstep with them, and that's critical. Implement good vulnerability management. And think of this as the life cycle when I talked about it. You need to be doing vulnerability management. You need to know where your critical assets are, identify them, write them on a whiteboard, write them in on something that you can have always in front of you. And you know the servers, the systems, and the network that has the most critical assets. We even have encouraged a lot of the clients to move to a 15-day, 30-day, and a 45-day rolling vulnerability management lifecycle. And that's critical for today, especially as how many 0 days have rolled out this year. You need to be able to patch your systems quickly. Leverage good parsing of log data. We have heard from a lot of folks, you know what, we've got this log data coming in, and it's coming into a centralized bucket, if you will, but nobody logs into it, and the searching of the log data is kind of cumbersome. And so then therefore, we all know that this data is going over to this point, this bucket, but we're not actively using it. And it's really not telling us a lot. Well, so they don't find value in it. When you move into a real solution that is parsing the log data, metadata and correlation is happening, you'll start to get good value alarms and alerts out of that information that's coming at you, not just putting it into a bucket. And then moving that methodology into user behavior analytics. You want to be able to increase behavioral effectiveness on the network. That includes software, hardware, and even SaaS. I have known organizations that have logins. You're either using SSO or you're not using SSO on SaaS and multi-cloud providers. And your data in your access is still inside of those multi-cloud and SaaS providers. So you're responsible for the security of the front end of that system. Whereas the cloud and the SaaS is responsible for the security of the back end, the underlying nature of it, but you're still responsible for the security on the front end. And then leveraging SOAR, which is security orchestration and automated response capabilities to reduce that manual time. You really don't want your SOC people manually logging accounts out, resetting passwords, and making these cumbersome, mundane changes. They're going to burn a lot of time. They're going to miss alarms and alerts that are legitimate, and they're ultimately going to miss other security issues that are happening, and it's going to just be a problem. It's going to be a snowball effect. So what I would encourage you to do is just look into orchestration and automation for your SOC team, and reducing manual items. Keep a list. Encourage the SOC team members to keep a list. What am I doing manually that I think that I should actually be doing in some sort of automated way? I don't know how to automate it today, but I still think that this could be done in an automated way. And then it's a list of questions. And then maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, review those questions that you've been keeping with the rest of the team, and take 30 minutes and review them, 60 minutes and review them. That's important because you could find out that there could be other skill sets on the team that could help automate some of these things. So that's really the key takeaways. That's really the meat and potatoes for today's webinar. I hope that has helped you, and we'll be doing more webinars that are on similar content pieces like this. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them.
Thank you so much, Jason. That's great. I've got a question here, and you mentioned this on the presentation, and this has come out a couple of times with some of the CIOs that we've been talking to across the United States. There's this shift from on-prem infrastructure to cloud, right? And so, when it comes to IT and security, maybe could you highlight the top 3 things to consider for SOC teams, whether that's just as a whole unit, not necessarily like an analyst or an engineer, but do you have kind of some recommendations on the top 3 things to consider for SOC teams as they transition to the cloud?
Yeah, I would say first thing is you want to be able to make sure that you can manage the identity. A lot of organizations are talking about centralizing the identity provider here, simply because you don't want to have different identity logs and authentication happening out in each one of these cloud providers. That's why when you go to a product, you see, hey, sign in with Facebook, sign in with Google, sign in with whatever identity is the quickest one on there. You want to hold back on that as much as you possibly can. You want to have a centralized identity so that single sign-on is authenticating to one central point somewhere inside your organization. That's either Microsoft Azure AD Premium, that's AD back on-prem, or that's some sort of other identity provider. The next biggest thing would be is to number 2 on there would be being able to manage and still receive the logs from those SaaS and cloud providers, simply because you want to make sure that if the authentication is success, that it is the intended party logging into that SaaS or that cloud platform and using it how they would normally use it. You can apply user behavior analytics even on cloud and SaaS platforms. And then the third major thing that I would understand is how are you as the SOC team helping to secure that data that's out in a cloud or SaaS company? While you know that the data is stored there, you want to make sure that the data is not being exfiltrated out of that cloud SaaS company without you being able to identify and understand the data movement. I think that too many companies today, and what we've even heard from CIOs, is that they have relied on that the SaaS cloud provider is doing a good job, an adequate job, or a satisfactory job of securing the data. But then if you just look back over the last year of the number of those providers that have had a security breach, and then their data, the customer's data, gets pasted out on the public internet. So we today think about going forward in the future as SOC providers, and you're building a SOC team. You've got to say, you know what? I trust you. You're going to do the best you possibly can, but I also need to have a second set of eyes on making sure that that data remains secure. Or the moment that it's no longer secure, I need to know what we're doing to help remediate it.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, Blackbaud would be a case in point that I know some of the people we've worked with have experienced those issues where it happened outside of their domain, it happened outside of their immediate area of influence. So protecting that data is key. We had another question come in here. This is it says RDP and manufacturing industry issues. I'm assuming that means they're having some RDP and manufacturing issues. Could you share some input on the tactics for resilience or on resilience?
Yeah. So we have noticed this. A number of clients that we've spoke of and had interactions with over the last year, especially since the 0-day came out around the RDP. What you have to have is in order for RDP access to happen, you really shouldn't allow RDP natted through the firewall anymore. We should provide a multi-layer step in order for somebody to get access to RDP to a server or to a desktop or to some sort of machine. And I know that sounds counterintuitive to even some of the Microsoft capabilities over the last few years of them allowing RDP sessions to generate. But the problem so we created this security trust that the Microsoft identity of Active Directory would protect us from that, and that failed us, right? So now we need to take a step back and say, I'm going to put this behind a couple more layers. Some of the tactics would be is using SSO and even doing MFA on the front end of that. So let's say, for instance, if you didn't have VPN, you could MFA the RDP access, and you could also SSO it. This way here, you've got those two pieces. The third piece that I'd really recommend is if you can put it behind a VPN type of access. So now that you have 3 layers up front before somebody can actually RDP into a server or a workstation. That can all be pretty done and easy. And I know some people would probably disagree with that statement, but at the same token, the risk is, and this is how you have to sometimes message it, the risk is if we don't do these steps and somebody does gain RDP access to our environment, literally we talked to about 6 organizations this year that the criminal RDP'd into the environment, got in, did all that they needed to do in less than 14 minutes, and they ransomed the entire environment. And 3 of those companies were on the verge of literally going out of business. The company didn't have the money to sustain the problem, did not have cybersecurity insurance. And so it's a big deal. So we do need to do these steps. I hope that answers your question. If not, let me know.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Jason. And if you have a question here or a follow-up, you can feel free to email us. Our information is here on the screen to reach out to Jason, but then also you can reach out to us at bitlyft.com. It looks like we have just a couple more minutes, and I wanted to throw out this question to you. So I know, just looking at some of the audience list on today, there's IT directors, security analysts. There's a wide spread of type of people on the webinar. To kind of summarize 2 areas, right? Those who are looking to build a SOC, like they're going down that venture, maybe they're just starting out, and then a secondary person is maybe a group or a team that's already established, a SOC team that's already in place. Could you maybe throw out a couple, like, just if they're starting the conversation for the new person, what would be some key areas for them to start talking about now when building a SOC from the ground up? And then maybe speak to that second person or that second group, an already established SOC. Where are some areas they could start the conversation for a good ROI to notch up that efficiency or that effectiveness of their SOC?
Yeah. So I'll start out on your first one. Oftentimes, if you're building a SOC from the ground up and you're thinking, we need to start hiring this talent and we need to start to identify where we're going and what we're going after, I would set 3 to 5 objectives that you want to try and hit, in the first 6 months to a year. Oftentimes, what we see happen is people try and put way too much on their plate, and then not a lot gets done. And it's because you see this huge wall in front of you, and it's like, how am I going to climb this thing? So what you would want to do is start out with identifying your network assets, your hardware assets, your software assets. And I know that sounds probably 101. It is a little bit, but still, organization after organization we've talked to over the last few years still has struggled to have a up-to-date hardware and software asset list. And this is critical because if you hire people, let's say, for instance, you hired me as your security team to help you, or I was going to join your team. The first thing I would ask you is what's installed in this environment and how do we want to secure it? What are we securing? And I know those sound like basic questions, but you have to understand, what am I securing before I can secure it? Not just throw, firewalls or throw technology at problems. We really want to be able to build a strategy and build a plan. So those are some of the foundational components that I would have on that. The second question, that if the team already exists and there's already good asset management in place, you might already even have a SIM in place, then I would start to identify the KPIs and metrics that you want to actually improve upon inside the team. Take a whole day if you can. Take the SOC team and the IT team, maybe take a few hours in the morning and a few hours in the afternoon, and really set aside a time to say, how did we do this year? Did we learn anything? Was there any areas, any threats that got in that maybe we just nearly bumped and bruised our knees, but that really could have went bad if we didn't identify that quicker? What you want to do is lay out on the whiteboard, or however you want to think about it, is lay out all the things that happened this year as top topics, and start to identify the areas that you can achieve this upcoming year on improving. Maybe it's improving detection, maybe it's improving our log quality. Maybe we've got too much logs coming at us, and we need to actually reduce the amount of volume of logs coming at us so that we're only focused on high quality logs. Those are some of the things that I would ask you as a team that's in place, is to focus on 5 to 7 items that really are going to help you make a difference as your team moves forward.
That's great. Well, Jason, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time today. Thanks for sharing this. Again, if you're watching this either live or you're watching this on demand, feel free to reach out to us. We talk a lot about building a community of cybersecurity advocates. So if you have questions, want to bounce ideas, don't feel like you're going to get an immediate sales pitch. We want you to succeed just as much as we want ourselves to succeed, and we're in this together. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.